What's up guys, Houndish here. We're jumping in with a bunch of Marathon updates because obviously this is going to be a very big week for Marathon and Bungie in terms of previews, new details about the game, big reveals via the state of play and directly from Bungie as they confirmed they will actually have a live stream much later on today. So we'll talk about the open playtest. They also confirm some stuff about that. They talk about anti-cheat, new details about looting and the survival aspect of Marathon, which they're really kind of pushing as one of the key features of it. As this statement suggests here from Joe Ziegler, who's the game director for Marathon, the key difference is that Destiny makes you a superhero, but in Marathon you're a survivor. And it is a pretty good comparison, although I would assume Joe Ziegler does not read the twids because at this point anyone who plays Destiny is a survivor. And whether you consider yourself a survivor of the content drought or just 10 years of Destiny in general, well, that's up to you. Let me know in the comments. On to the stuff that's going to be happening this week. They've now confirmed they will officially be part of the PlayStation State of Play. That is not remotely surprising, considering Sony and Bungie's relationship, but February 12th at 2 PM Pacific is when that State of Play will kick off. And additionally, Bungie will actually have a late live stream of their own, or at least relatively late versus what Bungie normally do, as they'll hold their own gameplay live stream with special guests and the game director that'll kick off at around about 3 PM Pacific time. So following on immediately from what we get in the State of Play, there will be some dedicated stuff coming directly from Bungie. On top of that, they've seen some speculation about a surprise preview weekend drop. And this is the kind of open weekend for Marathon they've been talking about. They do confirm, however, it is not coming this weekend. That's why I referenced Playtest Hopium yesterday, especially from the big Marathon fanboys. I'm not using the term fanboy critically, by the way. I just mean the folks who are absolutely wild for more Marathon info. They were almost convinced that it was happening this weekend, but confirmation now that it isn't. However, we may actually get some details from Bungie about that today, potentially, because, well, if it's over a weekend, it will be in the next 2 weeks following this weekend, right? Because otherwise, then it's not a preview. The game will already be out. How do I know this? Well, I have a calendar. And of course, the open weekend is a marketing exercise as opposed to really being a beta or a true test, because obviously if it's happening within a week or so of Marathon drop-in, there's not a lot of time to respond to feedback, perhaps outside of, kind of the technical side, servers, and seeing how things perform under real load, I guess. But I'll keep you posted when we get info about that. We've had a lot of gameplay from an event that took place in China. Bungie have said there will be more coming from creators around the globe as they rev up for launch, but clearly there's a really big push for Marathon in the Chinese market and perhaps other Asian markets as well. And even when you look at the kind of visual style, some of the themes in Marathon, actually, that makes a lot of sense. We do have bits of information about Marathon seasons though, which have been discussed a little bit. Joe Ziegler confirmed that they will last around 3 months, and every season will be a fresh start. So the game will experience these kind of full wipes that we do see in similar titles, although cosmetics will carry over between seasons, and every season will bring new content and systems to keep progression feeling fresh. And I believe one of the core components of the wipes on top of any gear will be some of the kind of stat boosts that we can earn from factions through the course of seasons. Another big thing that's important for Marathon is anti-cheat, and Joe Ziegler said we're always committed to keeping Marathon secure and maintaining a high-integrity competitive environment. Games with this kind of gameplay are especially vulnerable to exploits and cheating, and as players ourselves, we genuinely understand the frustration of having a match ruined by bad actors. I know the Destiny players are going to chime in on this one because the state of cheating in Destiny is, well, it's pretty bad. So if you feel a bit salty about that statement, I understand why. But Bungie say, in terms of Marathon, they've done a lot of preventative work. More importantly, we're prepared to respond to any cheating situations that come up. And as everyone knows, cheating in online games is constantly evolving. It requires ongoing, continuous countermeasures, which is arguably where Bungie have fallen flat on the Destiny side. Some of the other bits of news and detail that came out of some of the outlets that experienced Marathon in China. Apparently they held an event early in February in Shanghai, where the demo was fully localized, featuring polished and natural Chinese text and voiceovers, which again demonstrates that Bungie are really pushing the game in this market. And on a commercial level, that's obviously a good idea. The reviewer's personal impressions, according to this, is that the game does not encourage prolonged fights for both PVE and PvP. The gunplay is top-notch and the aim assist compares to Destiny 2, with each gun having its bespoke values. But kind of coming away from the version of Marathon I played back in the closed alpha 10 months ago at this point, PvP gunfire will attract distant AI, transforming them into world police to eliminate both sides in one sweep. So firefights may indeed be less isolated now. And it'll be something to be aware of as you engage different enemy types. They are essentially alerting not only other players, but more PvE, and obviously that impacts survivability in general. The amount of downtime you have for looting, healing, and indeed even issues with ammo could play into that, which is suggested from these impressions. Ammo is extremely scarce, and the AI robots rarely drop ammo, with survival crates yielding very little. And so their feedback was that this often led to kind of early extractions after just 1 or 2 engagements. But they also said that loot distribution felt extremely inconsistent, with some points of interest having virtually nothing to collect, which sucks as the PvE fights have already depleted ammo and meds in a lot of situations. So that kind of feeds into what I was getting at a moment ago. But keep in mind, it is a first impression, and of course, there could be certain methods or places where general survival kits, ammo, stuff like that may be more prevalent, and perhaps there's sort of a skill or a learning curve to a little bit of that, or maybe the game just simply will require more tuning. We'll have to see when we get to play it, but the reviewer also suggested that their way of playing was to kind of loot in the shadows solo, and they often wondered why even fight other players. Again, this is an early impression, but some folks will read into that as there's no value in fighting other players. Other folks may see it as potentially an opportunity that makes the game more appealing, right, depending on the type of player you are. On the subject of a PvE only mode, Joe Ziegler also suggested that this is something they'll save for the future as a potential additional component. We've always argued that Marathon having a fleshed out PvE experience of some kind could actually be hugely beneficial for the game, but obviously Bungie haven't gotten to that yet. They also said there will be no safe pocket system at launch, but they may consider it in future season based on player feedback, and that aggression-based matchmaking will not be a thing. Of course, we see that in things like Arc Raiders, where it's essentially looking at what kinds of engagements you typically get into, and then trying to match to players based on that. Share your thoughts on that below. Otherwise, in terms of the scope of these lobbies, larger maps will support up to 18 players, which will be 6 squads, and smaller maps will support 12, for a total of 4 squads. Expanding on the commentary about the PvE mode, Joe Ziegler had said, we're definitely not making a game that has only a PvE mode. From a PvE perspective, we've built lots of compelling elements like high difficulty enemies and environmental threats. But the core of Marathon is about creating tension. In other words, in many situations, PvP is unavoidable, but at the same time, we also provide non-violent interaction tools for players who prefer peaceful approaches, which I think is probably referencing prox chat largely. Additionally, players in Marathon will be able to hand items to a downed enemy so that they can revive themselves, so that's an interesting component. And in terms of kind of multi-platform support, Bungie have said players can opt out of PC matchmaking, although Bungie say controller versus mouse and keyboard has been heavily tuned so that both feel fair. We've done a lot of tuning to make sure that both input types can compete in the same match smoothly while still feeling fair, and that's an interesting one. Obviously, controller players versus very good mouse and keyboard players. I mean, it depends on the parameters of things like aim assist and weapon behavior in general, but oftentimes it tends to be mouse and keyboard that has the advantage. Although I appreciate there have been instances in games where aim assist on controller is ridiculous, right? In some respects, the kind of looting aspect and managing your backpack or the stuff you've actually got can be one of the areas where mouse and keyboard also has an advantage, right? Because it's so much faster and snappier. As I've said recently though, that's the bulk of the new info we really got today, but the open preview is going to be the biggest moment because it'll give players an extended period of time to actually get into the grit of Marathon and see how does the gameplay feel, but also how does it develop as you learn the game, both in terms of PvP and PvE, but also the survival curve, right? More importantly, in basic terms, we'll discover if the game is actually going to be fun. And with having a big preview like this, it's going to give both us and Bungie a really good idea of how the actual launch will go. In many ways, it's almost a soft launch. So if you want Marathon to do well, that will be the moment where we'll understand it. It will also be the moment where, if it's not going to go well, I think we'll additionally get a sense of that. So fingers crossed for it, and I would encourage everyone, if you're remotely interested, get into that open playtest. And if you have any doubts, certainly hold off on pre-ordering. And maybe even just stay off the internet, right? Let the game do the talking, man. Those are the updates for today. I'll keep you posted if there is anything really major with the state of play, especially an announcement about the open playtest. That is if I'm not already asleep by that point. Share your thoughts in the comments if you found the video interesting. A rating would really help us out. Hit subscribe if you want to stay up to date with Bungie, Marathon, Destiny news. Yeah, I know, hopefully we get that Destiny news soon. I'll keep you posted when it happens, but otherwise, cheers for watching, and I hope you have an awesome day.